Hey, you're about to listen to an older episode of the Volunteer Youth Worker podcast. This is a podcast that Sid Coop, Jason Ballard, and myself, Jeremy McDonald, started back in 2018 to answer the practical questions that you're asking in your youth ministry. But lots has changed since we started it in 2018. We've changed the name. We're doing new and different events and lots of other things. The thing that hasn't changed, though, is the content you're about to listen to, we think is still really valuable. But if you notice that some of the things we're talking about are obviously a little bit older, that is okay. You can always head to youthworker.community to stay up to date with what's happening currently right now here in 2024, and you can track along with us there. We'd love to see you. But enjoy this episode. Episode 113 of the Youth Ministry Team podcast. Welcome back. This is Jeremy hosting today's conversation. And if it's your first time, hey, we're really glad that you're here. This podcast is designed for you, the frontline youth worker, if you're volunteering in a small group, if you have volunteered in your youth ministry for any length of time, this conversation is for you. We want to give you practical answers to the questions that you are asking. And so this question is a big one that we're tackling today around the issue of hunger. But what I love about discussing this particular topic is that, number one, not only is it something that we're called to as Christians, but two, I think this generation, these teenagers that you work with, they are incredibly passionate about issues of justice, issues of fairness, issues of finding ways for, in our world today, to live out a really practical faith that changes things for the least of these. And of course, that is actually at the heart of the gospel. And yet, oftentimes we can struggle as youth workers to know, hey, practically speaking, what are we supposed to do to inspire action in our teenagers and then actually direct their steps? And so this particular conversation is going to actually answer exactly those questions. And not only that, but as Roberta's going to mention, the Canadian Foodgrains Bank has developed a resource. It's called the Hunger for Justice. It's a learning and reflection guide for youth groups, and you can actually access that for free. It is the link is in the show notes, and I think every one of you should go ahead and get that today. And then also in the show notes, there's a link to a webinar that we'll be hosting along with the Canadian Foodgrains Bank to walk through that resource, do a bit more of a deep dive on some, again, the practical things that you can be doing as youth workers to inspire these steps in students and direct them really clearly. So really looking forward to that. I think you want to definitely get a chance to access that. We also have some resources over on our blog as it pertains to thinking about this topic. And so if you haven't yet subscribed or followed us on Instagram or have liked our page on Facebook, we'll link those in the show notes as well. And that's where we throw our updates when it comes to things like resources over on our blog. Okay, so we'll jump into today's conversation. And then at the end, we'll give you a reminder about how to access that resource and fill you in on one of the other sponsors from today's episode.
Welcome to the Youth Ministry Team Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the team of volunteers. So this podcast is for the whole team. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you're asking so you can be encouraged and equipped as you head into your role in your youth ministry this week.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Youth Ministry Team podcast. I'm joined by Denise and Roberta. And by the magic of technology, you guys, this is so fun because I think of all the interviews that we've done on this podcast, this one is the broadest in terms of location. So I would love for you to introduce yourself to our guests. We'll start with Roberta and fill us in where you're coming from and a little bit about yourself as we get into this particular conversation today.
Hi, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, my name is Roberta Gramlich. I am coming to you from a bright, sunny day in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I work with Canadian Foodgrains Bank. So I work on the public engagement team there, and I've been there for about 10 years. And my work, public engagement is a lot about education and getting people to get involved. Specifically, I work with youth leaders and teachers and other educators to give them the tools and the support to be able to talk about global hunger issues with the youth that they work with.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that we get a chance to do some partnership with the Canadian Foodgrains Bank. And we'll be filling people in lots about that coming up towards the end of the podcast. Okay, Denise, tell us where are you coming from and what's a bit of your story?
Well, I'm speaking here from Managua, Nicaragua, and we are very fortunate that the dry season has been cut short. We've had rain, so we're very thankful for that. And I am working as an independent consultant. I'm a nutritionist, and I've been here since 1991.
That's amazing. Okay, so Nicaragua, fill us in. You're a nutritionist in Nicaragua. So I know nutritionists. I'm from the east coast of Canada. So when I go to the grocery store, there's a nutritionist at the grocery store who tells me what fruit to buy. What does it mean to be a nutritionist in Nicaragua?
In my case, well, first of all, we do have nutritionists and dietitians who do that sort of thing in the supermarkets and help people find a healthy weight. In my case, I work more in something called food security, and that is mostly in rural communities and working with small farmers, trying to help families and communities grow enough food to eat and helping them know what's best to eat as well, especially for their babies and young children.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And fill people in for myself, but also for lots of folks that are listening. Nicaragua, would it be, is it considered, I know it's central, but is it like part of North America, South America? What's it like? Lots of people, of course, haven't necessarily been in that particular part of the world.
Sure, yes. Nicaragua is pretty much in the middle of Central America, so we are sandwiched in between Honduras and El Salvador to the north and Costa Rica to the south.
Amazing. And just culturally, what's it like? You've been around for a long time. Fill us in a little bit of what it's like. I think you said you're in the capital. Is that right?
That's right. I live in the capital city in Managua, and people speak Spanish here. I've been here for very close to 30 years, so things have changed a lot. The city looks modern, and the countryside, the rural areas, much less so. And there's still a fair amount of poverty here.
When you we were talking a little bit beforehand, and so you landed there. Was it from a trip through the Presbyterian Church in Canada? And did you just go and then you stayed there, or you went and got captured by the country? Not captured like in a negative connotation, but it encapsulated your imagination. That would be
sure. That's right. I came down with the Presbyterian Church in Canada. That's right. With a youth and mission trip, and that was in 1991. And yeah, I'd already been interested in Central America, and I felt called to work in my field in Central America. And when I finished my degree the following year, then I came down as a volunteer. That's how it started.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's set the stage just with one more question, and then we'll dive into our big topic for today. Roberta, fill us in on what Canadian Foodgrains Bank actually is. Because again, lots of folks, this might be the first time that they're hearing about it.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Jeremy. I think I'm going to give you a bit of a background, a story about how we started, which will help kind of pave the way for our conversation. Mm-hmm. So back in the 70s, there was farmers here in Canada, particularly Mennonite farmers, who were kind of seeing images and hearing about people around the world who were hungry and didn't have enough to eat. And they, there was Mennonite Central Committee, which was an organization in their church that worked with communities around the world. And they went to Mennonite Central Committee and said, hey, we have extra grain that we'd like to share with these communities. So can you help us send it over? And there wasn't a mechanism to do that. Like, you can't just show up at a organization's office and dump a bunch of grain and, expect that it's going to get to people that need it. So little bit of work happened. They set up what they called the food bank, which explains a bit our name. And they talked to the Canadian government, who actually offered to give some matching funds, money, to be able to support this. But they said, you know what, let's not just keep this for this one church community. Why don't you open it up to other church communities? And so now we have 15 different member agencies, which are all connected to different denominations in Canada. And they might have their own projects separate from Foodgrains Bank, but they come together to work on what Denise said, food security issues. So basically working to help alleviate hunger in the world. And we don't send the grains anymore. Lots of things have changed. What happens now is they sell the grains here in Canada, or they get donations from churches and other places. That money is stored like a bank. So that's where you get our name, Canadian Foodgrains Bank. And then in times where it is needed, either to purchase food for people who are in crisis, or to support projects like what Denise was talking about, supporting, she said small farmers. That means small scale farmers, farmers that have small plots of land, for them to maybe adapt to climate change and adapt how they plant, or to help support them in some training programs. So that is what the Foodgrains Bank is, in a nutshell.
Yeah, so helpful. And so is it continuing to this day? Like, it involves different denominations, different churches? Is it primarily like a church group?
Yeah, so we're a church-based agency, but we're not connected to any one specific church or church denomination. So Mennonite, Presbyterian, Catholic, Pentecostal, and many others are included there. So what is really beautiful about this is it's really churches working together, people coming from across denominations, no matter what our theology is, that we're saying, you know what, this is a really important part of our faith, is to respond to hunger in the world. And so part of what I do, and I alluded to this earlier, is working in Canada to have Canadians engaged on this issue. So Canadians in general, but specifically Canadians in our Christian communities.
Yeah. Well, this is so helpful because for those of us that are listening, we've got obviously teenagers. That's our target market in the sense that as youth workers, we're invested in the faith of this next generation. And a critical part of our faith is this invitation we know, from Matthew 25 about, Jesus saying, hey, his kingdom is maybe different than, was definitely different than the kingdoms of the earth at that point, but still, even to this day, we're called to this practical outpouring of our faith to feed the people that are hungry. And so we kind of intuitively know that as Christians, maybe as youth workers, but how that works out can oftentimes be maybe more complex than we realize. So, we've got youth workers, and maybe they've been on trips where they go and they might serve at a food kitchen or like a soup kitchen, or even in our local towns, but the idea of hunger is obviously a massive one. And just to help us understand maybe even a bit of the complexities of it, Roberta, I would love for you just to explain a little bit of why sometimes what you folks do at the Canadian Foodgrains Bank is just as much about teaching people a little bit about hunger than it is about trying to convince them to go and grow some strawberries in their backyard to send overseas. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes the things that we try to do to help aren't actually that helpful. I love even, sorry, and then you can respond. But I love the fact that you say, at some point it was about sending grains, and then at some point it's like, oh, I wonder if we sell the grain here and then grow the grain there, and that might actually be more helpful. So talk about the complexities of this a bit.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, I think that, like you said, people know that hunger exists in the world, and I think often we want to do something like this. It's a very basic calling, a basic biblical calling, but it is really complex. And even those of us who have worked in this kind of field for a long time, we are still learning. I want to share a story a little bit about when I was a youth. So When I was in high school, I formed a bit of a youth group in my church with some of my friends. And one story or one action I remember that we took was that there was this time one of the grocery stores in my community was offering, like, if you bought so much, you would get like a stamp. And then you had to collect so many stamps and then you would get free items. And so it was before Christmas and they were offering like so many stamps got you a free turkey. So we thought, you know what, let's collect stamps from our parents and from our church community, and let's get some turkeys and donate them to the food bank, which is a great, noble thing for youth to do, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And so we collected, I think we donated like 10 turkeys to the food bank. But as an adult now, I look back at that and think of the missed opportunities that could have helped us as youth kind of push us even further to learn more about hunger. So for instance, and that's where I think the role of like a youth leader could really be, is to help youth go deeper. So for instance, I think, you know what, I didn't learn anything about hunger in my community. We didn't go down to the food bank and say, you know what, can you teach us or can you tell us about who's using the food bank or how many people in a week? And I was also thinking about, like, you know what, I don't even know, we didn't even ask them, like, do you have people that would eat these turkeys? Like, are they single people or are they families, right? Like, if it's a single person and they get like a big turkey, are they going to eat it all by themselves? So we didn't even inquire as to whether this would be helpful. We just assumed. Because my family, would eat a turkey or something like that. The other thing is, did we cause extra burden on the food bank? Like, did they have enough freezer space to hold these turkeys? And even the people that received them, did they have freezer space to hold these turkeys or to prepare it and so forth? So, I mean, that was a great thing for us to do as a youth group. But now I look back with a different lens and think about, what are some of the questions that we should have asked? And then what are some things that we should have learned to help create maybe more structural change? Because, these families may have received a turkey. I'm hoping they had a really nice Christmas meal. But in the long term, that probably didn't change much for them. And so that's just one example from here in Canada and from when I was a youth. But I know that Denise probably has other stories as well from Nicaragua.
Yeah, I want to hear it from the field, like in a different part of the world. Denise, what have you seen that has just reminded you, like, this is a complex issue and a lot of people don't quite understand that?
Well, for example, we've had medical brigades, and again, like I think, Roberta, that was just such a great example, because at first I was thinking, wow, what a great idea. Why not donate turkeys to the food bank? And I really couldn't think of anything wrong with that until Roberta started sharing. So, yeah, so thanks for that. And so medical brigades, probably same thing. I mean, what could be wrong or go wrong with that? And it does seem like a great idea to bring medical professionals to help people in an isolated rural community who don't have a lot of access to health services. And so we had a group who did a clinic for a few days, and we did a lot of preparation work, and we had a good space for it, a little house, and it was all arranged that people would be informed and they would come. And come they did, and with a variety of medical problems. But there were two things that stand out. One of them was we had some mothers bring children who were suffering from diarrhea, and the nurses who were attending them, and I was translating, the Canadian nurses gave some advice, which I have no doubt it was medically sound, but it wasn't quite right for the context. I think they said, well, try giving the child, if they're not hungry, they don't want to eat, try giving them stale ginger ale. Well, ginger ale isn't something that you get in the countryside. And that they should eat, try to get them to eat more bananas for the potassium and stuff. And again, it's not bad at advice, but what we try to do in cases like that here, when children have diarrhea, they get diarrhea all the time, unfortunately, because of the inadequate sanitary conditions. So we try to push things like protein, because we know the child, even though they're getting sick all the time, they need to grow, or they probably already are malnourished. So that was something that to me hit home, that it's hard when people they sure know what they're doing, but then it's different when it's in a different context, as in here.
Yeah, that's so helpful, just even to realize that, locally, that's a Roberta great example. Like locally, there's context to when people are hungry. And then even more broadly, there's so much more context to when people are hungry. And yet, here we are still faced with this call to, feed hungry people, to actually care about their needs and care about things like hunger as it is more broadly. So I guess maybe, and Roberta, I'll start with you. If you were to think about, we're speaking to youth workers, what are some ways that, youth leaders can actually articulate and direct teenagers as it pertains to global hunger in a way that is helpful? And it makes me actually think, so this is a bit of an aside, but I've got a few kids in my house. I've got 3 kids of my own. And my oldest, it was just today, actually, a couple hours ago, he came into the room I'm in now, the office. He's 5. So he's 5, but is learning, and the way that he articulates it is the world. The world needs help, and in particular around trash. So he's like really tied in. When we go for a walk, we got to pick up the trash, because otherwise the world will die. And he came in, honestly, said nothing else, but said, "Hey, Dad, if you turn off one of those lights, you have 2 lights on. If you could turn off one of those lights, it would be helpful for the world." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. Thanks, buddy." And, he's processing this idea of trying to be doing the right thing and doing the right thing even more broadly. And he's probably right a little bit. I could turn off a light. And yet there is an understanding of there's the childlike desire for justice that we have to steer so that it is helpful to make the right choices that are long-term going to be beneficial. So as youth workers, we're committed to that. What does it mean to help inspire our teenagers to practical things that they're excited, they've got the desire, but we need to teach them a bit more specifically about things like world hunger. So Roberta, let's start with you.
That's a great question, and one that I think that youth leaders have, it's a tricky role, to be honest. Okay, so because you want to balance like the energy that young people have and the passion that they have for wanting to make change in the world, but also to help steer them into a way that they begin to, and they become, they grow in being more, I don't want to say critical of the world, but aware of their actions, and to be able to kind of continue to learn and to question, so that they're making decisions that will be best for the result that they want. So that is a tricky place to be, because, like the turkey, going back to the turkey story, that's a great thing, right? No one's going to say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," or "Have you thought about this?" and kind of turn the activity into something negative. But at the same time, had we had a youth leader that's like, "That's a really great idea, and have you thought of this, that, and this other thing," to help them kind of deepen their understanding and to grow both in their faith, as to understanding as Christians, how are we called to do different things, but also in terms of actions in the world. So this is a time I'll just mention that Canadian Foodgrains Bank has created a guide called the Hunger for Justice Youth Group Learning and Reflection Guide, which is something that we are making available for free to youth leaders. It is on our website. And the idea of that is to give youth leaders some tools to help kind of walk their youth groups through some of these unpacking some of these questions. Mm-hmm. And at the Foodgrains Bank, we say that there's a lot of things that people need to do to respond to world hunger. It is a very complex thing. But we break it down into their 4 actions, because that makes it a little more easy for people to be like, okay, there's 4 different kinds of actions we can take. We can pray, which is an important action for us as Christians. And when we have, a community of Christians communities of Christians across the country and around the world praying, that is a really powerful thing. We can give, so giving money, but also of our time and talents to different projects. As well as to learn and to advocate. So learning is kind of what people are doing right now, listening to this podcast. They are learning more and they're deepening their understanding of hunger issues. And then advocacy is going back to this, what we talked about, shipping grains abroad. Mm-hmm. The Foodgrains Bank knew that this wasn't necessarily the best practice, but we couldn't just change it ourselves, because there was actually a Canadian policy that said that food assistance from Canada actually had to be food that was grown in Canada. And so the Foodgrains Bank worked with different government officials, as well as with our public, to write letters, to contact their MPs, to say, you know what, this isn't the best policy to achieve what we want to achieve. So we see that advocacy basically means using our voices mm-hmm. to say, this needs to change. Maybe it's a small change, maybe it's a really big change. But if we're all using our voices and saying this one thing should change, or we need to support, this group of people, that's also a really important action.
Mm-hmm. Do you see that there's still a space for maybe a less than perfect step that inspires somebody to help them take their next step as it pertains to some of these things? So I just think about maybe even the turkey example. So that, ideally isn't the end of the road for thinking about how to be helpful for somebody that might be hungry in our community. And yet, do you still think it might be okay for that to have been part of maybe even your story? Like, oh, that was a stepping stone to help you realize, oh, there are hungry people, and I wonder if I can become even better at supporting and helping them. But it wasn't necessarily like it was a bad first step. Do you know what I'm trying to get at, Roberta?
Yes, totally. Yeah. So I think my answer to that is, for sure, everybody has to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so we don't want to get too tripped up on, having it be the perfect first step. At the same time, for your listeners, I think that what we want to do, though, is to try to think about, is this hurting anyone, mm-hmm. right? So kind of the turkey story probably wasn't hurting anyone, mm-hmm. But there could be examples of, let's say people, I don't know, Denise might have some better stories, of people going to Nicaragua and doing something in a community, volunteering, thinking that they're doing a really great thing, but actually they might be taking away jobs from locals. Mm. So, I think that I can look back and think about the mistakes that I've made, or organizations can think about the mistakes that they've made. But I think that we need to learn from our own mistakes and from others' mistakes, so that we're not keeping to repeat them, and that we're kind of passing those learnings on to the next generation. So I'm just going to point out that I've never actually said how I know Denise, and that is she has worked for. So we talked about these 15 different members in Canada that are part of Foodgrains Bank, but they all have what we call partners in different countries around the world. And those are the partners, the groups of people that are actually working in those communities to do the work of, whether it's bringing food to people or working with those farmers, or, as Denise said, working like on nutrition projects. And so Denise has worked with the Presbyterians, as well as one of our other members, and has worked very closely with our partners. Mm-hmm. And then I have encountered Denise because in our public engagement programming at Foodgrains Bank, we've done what we call learning tours. And these are where we take a group of Canadians, a small delegation of Canadians, and we go to a country. And we are not there to necessarily do anything other than to learn. And so that's how I've encountered Denise, is when I've gone to Nicaragua with a couple of different groups. And we've partnered with Denise, and she's taken us to communities and to really understand our role there. As I say to the group, our role is not to come and do anything. Mm-hmm. We are not the experts in Nicaragua. We're not the experts in, feeding Nicaraguans. We are here to listen to what is going on in the local communities and to better understand how we can support them.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I know you mentioned this a bit ago, but the that Hunger for Justice guide, we're going to offer a link that in the show notes. People should access that. They should download that. We're really excited to be able to get that out there. Denise, fill us in on when you have folks that actually come and learn, what are some of the things that you try to teach them or show them coming from like a Canadian context about hunger, about world hunger, about Nicaragua in particular?
Great question, Jeremy. Yeah. Well, one of the learning trips that we've done is around coffee. So we wanted to show how coffee is produced and who's growing it, what the steps are, and all the steps before it gets exported. So I guess we want people to see how hard people here work, and that, yes, Nicaraguans are capable of doing things for themselves, but there's a lot of things in the way. And, for example, public education could be better. So we also want people to see things that maybe they could possibly somehow in Canada make a difference. So in the case of coffee, we think it's a good idea that churches promote, or for their coffee hours, fair trade coffee, for example, where the farmers way down the line growing the coffee and the people picking the coffee are getting a fair wage. So that would be one example.
Can you speak to that a little bit? Because there's lots of folks that this might be new information or they're learning. So there are coffee producers that aren't fair trade. I would love for you to tell the difference between, if there is in Nicaragua, fair trade producers, farmers that are producing coffee, but that isn't in a fair way. And presumably, when we buy coffee at a place like Tim Hortons, I'm guessing it's not fair trade. It's not fairly grown, but I could be completely wrong.
Yeah. Tim Hortons I can really speak to, but how it works here is basically you can sell your coffee to a company, and really you're beholden to them in terms of what price you're going to get. Also, a lot of growers who grow on a very small scale, they don't have the capacity to process their own coffee, which is an important part of the step. So that means they're getting a lower price. Another option is cooperatives, where farmers organize themselves. And there's cooperatives that are really quite large, big businesses. And in fact, we visited one of them, and that is where the farmers have more of a buy-in and get a better price for their coffee.
That's good. So would you say anything about the experience of farmers? What does it mean if they're having to work and it's not a fair trade, like they're not getting a fair wage or a fair experience as a farmer? What does that actually look like?
The families in the countryside struggle to get by, and in general don't get the prices that they deserve for what they produce. So taking another example, beans. Even here within the country, here in the city, what we pay, it often feels like an expensive price. Let's just say the money here is called the cordova. So let's say we pay 30 cordovas a pound for beans. If you go at harvest time for beans, which in some parts of the country can be harvested 2 or even 3 times a year, so there is that. But if you go way out to the hard to get to communities, these farming families have very limited means of getting their produce, so their beans, their big 100-pound sacks of beans, out to the market. So they end up selling them for as low as the sack they sell the sack so low that it works out to like 5 cordovas a pound. So they can't get a fair price because there isn't the infrastructure, in this case, the roads, to get in and out of their community and where they're farming. So the families are struggling to put food on the table, basically, and the kids are suffering from malnutrition because, yes, they're eating what they grow, but they're also battling against climate factors and, in some cases, a lot of cases, very limited land on which to grow their food.
Yeah.
Could I just jump in for a minute and I want to summarize what Denise is saying, but to look at it from a different perspective. So Denise has gone quite technical, right, in talking about things. And I think that, and that's really great information. I think what you're highlighting is the importance of learning and understanding the local context. Because here in Canada, we can think, oh, people in Nicaragua are hungry and they need food. And so a response could be, well, let's just send them some food, right? Because they're hungry. But what you are saying is people are capable in many cases of producing food. It is other things like not having the infrastructure, not having the roads, climate, change happening. And so people having to adapt, like you even said, it's raining, so people have to adapt when they're planting. And so what we understand at Foodgrains Bank is how can we support those people? How can we support those people who are already living difficult situations? They are, the really, maybe the very poor, isolated areas. They are capable. They have agency. How can we support them to be able to produce more food or get their food to market or whatever it is, rather than us just doing it? So I just wanted to summarize to say that was a great example of why it's important. Education is always important, right? And whether that's at a youth group level or whether that's at the Foodgrains Bank level, and we are working with partners and members around the world.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because, Roberta, I think built into a bit of our cultural DNA is, that our purchases oftentimes are just based on price. So can I find the cheapest price for a particular good? And then we almost separate our purchasing from the good that we want to do in the world. So then we think, oh, there's hungry people. Can we find ways to send them food so that they're not hungry? When what you're teaching us or kind of talking about is that these things are really connected, and that theoretically we have the ability, even with our purchases, to be helping hungry people, or to actually not make people hungry because of the way that some of these supply chains are built. But that's really complex. And so maybe help us take us one more time around a bit, maybe either the guide that you guys are creating or ways that you would love to see youth workers and youth leaders help teenagers take more steps. We know it's a bit about learning, but maybe you can give us a practical step to think about even for this week to start a little bit more on this journey to live out our faith in a really practical way as it pertains to world hunger, global hunger.
Right. So if we haven't scared people off yet,
yeah,
I'm glad that they're still with us. So kudos to everyone who's still listening. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the guide, because what it is it helps unpack some of these things. This information is good background information for a youth leader to kind of listen to and then reflect on the activities we propose in the guide. But let me talk about that a little bit, because I think that'll be there's a lot to chew on in that resource. So it is a 3-part, we're proposing 3 sessions that the youth leader would go through with the youth group, either virtually or in person. So depending on what the situation is in your region at the time. And I mentioned the pray, give, learn, advocate actions that the Foodgrains Bank proposes. And so those are talked about in the different sessions. And it is done in a kind of a chronological way, where the group starts by unpacking what are different actions. What are these, what we call charitable actions of, like, I'm going to give a turkey. I'm going to bring some food to my food bank. Which is an important action in the times of need. And what are some actions for justice, where those are the ones that are more complex. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. People will sometimes get scared off and run away, but I don't want people to. I want them to just to little by little, okay? So there's some activities that kind of break those down, and then you could talk about in your youth group. The second session is focused on learning. Why are we called? Like, what is the biblical foundation for all of this that's put in the guide? Why is learning so important? And there's some different things, some different elements, like a video for people to kind of understand a little more about small scale farmers in this case. And then the third session is on advocacy. It starts out by, like, again, what are the biblical foundations for that? Why are we doing that? Is that a Christian thing to do? And so there's definitely some stuff to think about there in terms of scripture. And then it's leading the group into writing a very simple letter to their member of parliament saying, you know what, I care about people around the world. And this is why. There are tools in the guide to help the youth leader with all of these activities. And I am always I shouldn't say I'm always at my computer, but I'm always willing to respond to questions and inquiries. If somebody said, I was confused by this, or can you help me better understand how this fits into all of this? And so the guide is hopefully an early step or a first step into exploring some of these issues. And it is done with a lens of global hunger, because that's what the Foodgrains Bank is about. That's our mission, is to for all to be fed in the world. But these principles that are put in the guide could be applied to other social situations, whether it's in somebody's community or more globally.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that, in this season, as we've been through, the pandemic, there's a lot that we've perhaps been hoping for as youth workers, and finding, pivotal experiences that really inspire students. We've struggled, I think, as youth workers to find those. And so this guide is a great answer to that. And, youth workers, we know that this generation is absolutely committed to justice issues, and as the church, we should be the ministry. We should be the people that are the most committed to the justice issues of our day, and inspiring teenagers to take steps through our ministries to help justice come across our world. And yet oftentimes teenagers look to other places to flex those muscles, because maybe they've not found an outlet through the local ministry, the local church. And so really excited about this guide. I think it's going to be a great service to youth workers all over the place. So we'll access that. So as we wrap up today, would love for you to leave us just with any final words for our listeners, our youth workers, anything that you want them to know or to hear as we close out. Denise, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I just want to thank you, first of all, Jeremy, for having us here today, and for the interest of Canadian and American youth, and of course of their leaders. It means a lot that there is interest and on the part of youth, and I hope that something that we've said this morning will spark ideas and more desire to learn. And yeah, I pray for change both in North America and in Nicaragua and in countries where God is at work, and there's been improvement over 30 years. So we're getting somewhere.
I love it. Roberta, how about for you?
Yeah, again, thank you so much for having us and giving us the opportunity to connect with you about this. I have a few thoughts. One is I'm hoping people do not leave this feeling overwhelmed. I'll tell you, back when I was in university, I learned about kind of sweatshops and who made my clothes and some of the injustices around that. And I thought to myself, goodness, I'm just going to have to be naked for the rest of my life, which is not a great solution. I was just so overwhelmed. But it really was a time where I was like, you know what, I'm just learning little by little, and I'm going to make small changes in my life or in my actions. And so I'm not perfect. I am not perfect. I am still learning. I'm still adapting. But I don't want people to be overwhelmed, right? If this is something that sparks them and go, wow, I'm going to look into this, or I want to make some change, that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to talk about is just like from the faith perspective is, I went to church my whole life and listened to stories and so forth. And it was when I met people that were talking about social justice issues and where I learned about like charitable acts and justice acts, and my mind was blown. I remember thinking, these are my people. My goodness, I feel so at home. I feel like this is a calling for me. Like this is, I was inspired by my faith before, but I just really felt a passion. And I have met people of different Christian denominations that are taking up the torch and that are really inspired by their faith to do this work. And so just letting people know that you never know which youth in your youth group could really make a great change in how they live their Christian life.
I appreciate it so much. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to all that it's going to do for youth workers all around the world. Thank you guys. Well, there you go. You're going to want to access that guide, the Learning Reflection Guide for Youth Groups, all about hunger and justice. And so you can do that through the show notes. Really grateful for Foodgrains Bank for providing that, for thinking that through. And I've looked through their videos, just phenomenal thing. You definitely want to access that for your small group. Run it with your small group, run it with your whole youth ministry, however you see fit. But do get that resource for free. And then want to let you know about today's other sponsor. We've got Trinity Western University, a great school out on the west coast of our country, Canada. They've got another couple of campuses though, and by all means, it's worth checking out, because if you have got students who are kind of processing what their next steps are, maybe they're grade 12 students this year, or other age high school students, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, they're kind of thinking about what their next steps are. We really believe that if you can help them take steps into an environment post high school where their faith can be nurtured, that's going to make a dramatic impact for their faith over the long haul. And Trinity Western does just that. They are around, their mission is to develop godly Christian leaders. And so they do that through their school, and they've got just an enormous array of programs, different bachelor's degrees that your students could be very, very interested in. So make sure that just as a youth worker, you kind of understand and know a bit of what the options are that are out there, so that you can be advocating for the right next steps for your teenagers. So Trinity Western, their link is in our show notes. Be sure to check them out, learn a bit more about them. And then we'll see you all back here next time for another episode of the Youth Ministry Team Podcast.